à tous.
Good morning, everyone.
Quand on parle d'énergie dans le cadre du monde arabe, il y a un
When
mot
we
qui vient tout
talk
de suite à
about
l'esprit, c'est
energy in the Arab
hydrocarbures,
world, we always
pétrole,
think of
gaz.
oil, gas.
Aujourd'hui, on va essayer de prendre un peu le
Today, we will
contre-pied
try
de
to
cet état de
go a
fait,
different
essayer de
way
comprendre pourquoi on a les
and try to
ferments aujourd'hui d'un
understand
développement
why we have the
très récent des
beginnings
énergies
of
renouvelables, des
a
énergies
new
alternatives en
development
général. On va
of
peut-être parler
renewable
peut-être
energies or other alternative
nucléaire
energies. Maybe we'll
dans
say a word about
le
nuclear
monde arabe.
energy
Alors
in the Arab
il y a
world.
beaucoup à dire et nous sommes
There's a
nombreux.
lot to say, and
Donc,
there are many of
on va
us.
essayer d'avancer très
So we're
rapidement.
going to try
Parler de
and
cette question de l'émergence,
move
de
forward quickly.
l'opportunité
So to talk
de
about
développer
the
les énergies
emergence and the
renouvelables. Pourquoi est-ce
opportunities
que c'est
in the
une opportunité?
development
Pourquoi est-ce que
of
c'est
renewable
peut-être
energies?
même une
Why is
nécessité
it an
aujourd'hui
opportunity?
dans le monde
Why is
arabe?
it
Nous
maybe
accueillons
necessary for the
Monsieur
Arab world today? We're
Ait
going
Laoussine,
to
qui est ancien
listen to Mr.
ministre
Ait
de l'énergie
Laoussine, who's a former
algérien et qui
minister of
aujourd'hui
energy
préside
from
une
Algeria
société
and
de
who now
conseil qui s'appelle
chairs
Malcosa.
consultancy firm
Nous
called
accueillons
Malcosa.
Monsieur Saïd Mouline, qui
We
dirige
will also have
l'Agence marocaine du
Mr.
développement
Said
des énergies
Moulin, who's
renouvelables et
a
de
general
l'efficacité
director of the
énergétique.
Moroccan
Nous avons
Agency
également le plaisir
of Renewable
d'accueillir
Energy
Madame
and Energetic
Shermine
Efficiency.
Dajani, qui
We have
préside une
Mrs.
société
Shermine
de
Dajani,
développement
who is a
énergétique
CEO of
importante
an energy development
en
company
Jordanie,
in
mais
Jordan.
pas seulement. Elle
But
nous
not
expliquera un petit peu
only,
ses
she will
activités
tell us more about
qui
her
s'appelle
business.
PanMed Énergie.
It's called PanMed Energy.
Ensuite, nous avons le privilège
Then we
d'accueillir
have
Monsieur
the
le Dr
honor
Mahmoud
of
Salameh,
welcoming
qui est un
Dr.
expert
Mahmoud
international
Salameh,
connu,
who is
réputé depuis
a
très longtemps
famous
dans le
international
domaine de
expert
l'économie
in the field of
pétrolière et dans le
oil
domaine de l'énergie en
economy
général,
and energy in general
dans le monde arabe et
in the
ailleurs.
Arab world and elsewhere.
Et pour finir, nous avons
And
également le
finally,
privilège
we
d'accueillir Monsieur
also
Gérard
have the
Mestrallet,
honor
qui
of having Gérard
préside
Mestrallet,
GDF
who is
Suez.
the CEO
Alors,
of
je vais donner la
GDF
parole
Suez.
dans un premier temps
So I'm
à
first
Monsieur
going to
Nordine
give the
Ait
floor
Laoussine
to Mr. Nordine
pour
Ait Laoussine
Monsieur Ait Laoussine nous expliquer peut-être
so that he
pourquoi
can tell us
aujourd'hui, plus que jamais,
why
il est
today,
important, il
maybe
est
more
intéressant
than
pour
ever, it
les
is interesting
pays arabes
for
et pour
Arab
l'Algérie peut-être en
countries and
particulier de
maybe
se
for
tourner
Algeria
vers
more
les énergies
specifically
renouvelables.
to
Quels
go towards
sont les
renewable
obstacles
energies. What
aujourd'hui
are
sur le
the
chemin
current
de ce développement et
hurdles
peut-être pour finir, qu'est-ce
in
peut
their
vous
development,
tirer
and
comme
maybe
enseignement
what kind of
des autres pays arabes,
teachings can you
peut-être votre, je ne sais pas, peut-être
get
votre
from
voisin
other
marocain,
Arab countries,
qui
maybe from your
qui sont
Moroccan
à
neighbor,
l'avant-garde de ce développement des
especially
énergies renouvelables
neighbors
aujourd'hui
who
dans le
are
monde arabe. Je vous
pioneers
laisse la
in the
parole.
development of renewable energies in the Arab world.
Voilà. Merci, Monsieur Ozano.
Thank you, Mr. Ozano. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
Pour éviter toute confusion, je ne suis pas ici
In order
pour
to
parler
avoid any mistake, I'm not here to talk about Algeria. The question I will try answering is what is the current or expected contribution of renewable energies in the renewal of the Arab world. Of course, during the debate, I will be very happy to welcome questions on my own country. Answering such a question during a 10-minute presentation is no easy task. So I will have to limit myself to a general talk, or rather a brief overview on the development of renewable energies in the region. And I will specifically focus on solar energy and wind energy, which are by far the most promising sources of green energy in our region. I will also
sur ce qui me paraît évident
I will not have time to talk about what seems to be obvious and that we should generally agree on during this roundtable.
Il est incontestable, en effet,
It is indeed
que le développement des énergies
obvious
renouvelables
that
dans le
the
monde
development
arabe
of renewable energy in the Arab
un
world
objectif vertueux.
is a virtuous goal.
D'abord parce que les pays de la région
First of all,
disposent
because
tous
the countries of
d'un
this
potentiel
region
pratiquement
all
illimité
have an almost
dans les
unlimited
différentes
potential
filières du solaire
in the various
et d'un réservoir
sectors
substantiel
of
d'éolien
solar
presque
energy
partout,
and
sans
also
oublier
a significant
l'hydroélectricité
wind
qui
potential,
constitue
without
aujourd'hui
forgetting
la
hydraulic
source prédominante
power,
d'énergie
which is
verte,
the
notamment en
predominant
Égypte,
green
au
energy
Maroc
source,
et en
especially in
Irak.
Egypt, in Morocco, and in Iraq.
Ensuite, parce que le mix énergétique arabe
Also,
pour la
because
génération
the
électrique
Arab
repose à plus de
energy mix
95%
in the
sur
Arab
les
world
énergies fossiles
relies
non
for more than
renouvelables
95%
qui sont en
on
voie
fossil
d'épuisement
fuels,
dans de nombreux
non-renewable
pays de la
energies,
région.
which are being depleted in
Le
most
développement
countries in
d'énergies
the region.
renouvelables
The development
renforce
of
ainsi
renewable energies
la sécurité
thus
d'approvisionnement
strengthens
énergétique à long terme.
our
Enfin,
energy
parce
sourcing
que
in the long term.
ce développement contribue
And
à la
finally, because this
diversification de
growth
l'économie et au développement
allows for
durable,
diversification of
tout en
the
participant
economy
à
and
la lutte
of
contre le
sustainable
réchauffement
development,
climatique
while
et
helping
à la
in the fight against
protection de
climate
l'environnement.
change and the protection of the environment.
L'objectif est vertueux,
So it is a virtuous
certes,
goal, indeed.
mais le chemin de la réussite est
However,
long et
the
tortueux.
path to success is a long
Tous
and
les pays
tortuous
de la
one.
région affichent
All
des
countries
objectifs
in the region
extrêmement ambitieux.
Have very
Et nombreux
ambitious
sont ceux qui
objectives,
visent une contribution des
and
renouvelables
many of them
dans la génération
want
électrique
the
de
renewable
20 à
sources of
40%
energy
à
to
l'horizon
reach
2030.
20 to 40% by
Le bilan des
2030.
réalisations à ce jour des différents programmes lancés
The
depuis le
current
début de ce siècle
situation
est cependant
programs
décevant.
launched since the year
4%
2000
de
is nevertheless
contribution en
disappointing.
2013.
4%
En
of
fait,
contribution in
Moins de
2013.
1% si on
And
exclut
actually less than
l'hydroélectricité,
1% if you
à comparer
remove
à une
hydraulic
moyenne de
power,
plus de 20% à l'échelle
compared
mondiale,
to a global
et
average
nettement plus,
of more
bien
than
entendu, dans la zone
20%,
OCDE.
and even higher percentage in the
Les principaux
OECD
obstacles
region.
sont connus.
We know the main
L'avenir dépendra
constraints
de la
and
façon dont
barriers.
ces obstacles seront levés.
The future will depend
Je vais
on
donc
how we manage
réserver
to
le
overcome
reste de cette
these barriers.
intervention à
So
quelques
the
axes de réflexion
rest
à
of
ce
my
sujet.
presentation will focus on
Les pays de la région
potential
font face à une
approaches.
très forte augmentation de
The
leurs
countries
besoins
of the
énergétiques
region
pour répondre
are
notamment
facing
à la
a
demande électrique
significant
interne
increase
qui
in
connaît
their
depuis
sourcing
quelque temps
needs
un
because of
taux de
internal
croissance
demand,
annuel
which
supérieur à
has
5%,
grown yearly
des
by more
plus
than
élevés
5%
au
in the past few years, one of the highest
L'augmentation
rates
des
in the
besoins
world.
énergétiques d'un
The
pays
increase
n'est pas un
in the
problème en
energy
soi.
needs of a country is not
Elle peut même
necessarily a
être le signe
problem.
d'une économie
It
en
can
bonne
even
santé
show that
et en croissance soutenue.
the economy is sound and
Ce n'est
growing
malheureusement
fast.
pas le cas dans le monde arabe,
It is, however, not
où
the
l'intensité
case in the Arab
énergétique, c'est-à-dire
world,
le rapport
in
entre
which
le PIB et
energy
la consommation
intensity,
d'énergie
that is the
primaire,
relationship
est
between
d'environ le
primary
double de la moyenne
energy
mondiale.
consumption and the GDP is
Autrement dit,
twice the
pour produire
global
la même
average.
richesse,
So in order to
on
produce
consomme
the
2 fois plus
same
d'énergie dans la
wealth,
région.
we use twice as much power
Il est
in the
évident
region.
qu'il convient en premier lieu
It is
de
obvious
maîtriser le
that we
rythme
first
effréné d'évolution
have
de la
to
demande
control
afin
this
de réduire les
increase
gaspillages et les pertes.
in demand in order
Une
to
multitude de
control
mesures sont à prendre dans ce
waste
domaine,
and losses.
dont
There are
certaines
many
ont
measures
déjà
that
vu un
should
début
be
d'application,
taken, and some of which
notamment
have
dans les
already been
pays
taken and
importateurs
implemented,
d'énergie,
especially in countries
que le
that
Maroc,
import energy,
la
such as
Tunisie
Morocco,
ou le
Tunisia,
Liban,
or Lebanon,
qui ont enregistré une remarquable amélioration
they have
de leur intensité énergétique.
seen a strong improvement of
Ailleurs,
their energy
il
efficiency.
serait illusoire d'espérer des progrès
Elsewhere,
notables tant que les tarifs
is not
de
possible to
l'énergie consommée
expect
localement restent
major
nettement
progress
en deçà des prix
as
de
long
revient.
as local energy
En
is
effet,
much under
les tarifs
the
applicables dans
cost
la
price.
région sont à quelques
Indeed,
exceptions près
local prices,
à un niveau qui
with a
représente
few
une
exceptions,
fraction
are at a
du
level
prix
which represent
international
only a small
et qui
part
sont
of the
souvent
international
inférieurs
price
au coût complet
and
de
are very
production,
often much below
tout
the
simplement parce qu'ils sont
production cost,
largement subventionnés.
quite simply because they're
À titre
heavily
d'exemple,
subsidized.
le tarif moyen de
Let me give you
l'électricité
an
payé
example.
par le
The average
consommateur
price of
des pays arabes
electricity
exportateurs
in
d'énergie
countries
est
that
généralement
Arab countries
inférieur
that export
à
energy
3 cents
is
de dollars
usually
par kilowattheure,
below $3
soit 10% environ
cents per
de la
kilowatt
moyenne
hour.
OCDE. La subvention des prix de l'énergie
Subsidizing
pratiquée à
energy
des degrés
prices
divers dans l'ensemble des pays de la
in
région
the different countries
n'est pas,
in the Arab world
là non plus, un problème en soi.
is not a problem
Procure un
either.
filet de sécurité
It is
souvent
a safety
indispensable
net
aux
that is
couches les
often
plus
necessary
défavorisées de la
for the
population
most
et
underprivileged
peut constituer
populations,
un levier puissant
and
dans la
it can
poursuite
be
d'objectifs
significant
stratégiques nationaux
leverage
en faveur
in order
du
to
processus
reach
d'industrialisation et
national
de diversification de
objectives
l'économie.
of
Elle
industrialization
entraîne cependant
and
des effets
diversification of the
pervers
economy.
à travers
Nevertheless,
les
there are
mauvaises
perverse
allocations
effects
des ressources disponibles.
because of a bad allocation of
Mais si le principe
existing
de la
resources.
subvention ne doit pas être remis en cause,
Even though we should not
et s'il
question
faut reconnaître
the subsidies
qu'une décision
themselves,
d'augmentation
and we have to
des prix de
acknowledge
l'énergie sur le marché
that a
intérieur
decision to increase energy
toujours
costs
un
on
épineux
domestic
problème
markets
politique et une mesure
is
hautement
always
impopulaire,
very
il n'est plus
unpopular.
possible d'ignorer
It is
plus
no longer
longtemps
possible
ces effets pervers.
to ignore these
Il est
perverse
maintenant
effects.
démontré que ce régime,
It has now been
tel qu'il est
proven
appliqué
that
dans les pays qui
this
le pratiquent,
system, as it is implemented in the
inefficace
countries that use it, is not
est même
efficient
contraire à sa finalité,
and even goes against
dans la
its
mesure
objectives.
où une très faible partie de la subvention
Since a very
profite
small
réellement
part of
aux
the
couches de
subsidy
la population qui
actually
en ont le
goes
plus
to
besoin.
the people
Selon
that
un rapport
need
de la Banque
them.
mondiale,
According to
20%
a
des
World
plus
Bank
riches
report, 20%
bénéficient
of
6
the
fois plus de
wealthiest
ces
people
subventions que
benefit
20% des
6
plus
times
pauvres.
more of these subsidies
Il
than
convient donc
20% of the
d'organiser
poorest.
un retour progressif à des tarifs
So
basés
we
sur le coût de
need
production
to progressively
et
go
de
back to
substituer au
prices
régime universel de subvention actuel un
that
système
rely on the
de
actual production
compensation
cost
ciblé
and to
et
implement
direct
a
au
compensation
profit des
system
couches les plus
for
défavorisées.
the poorest people.
Il y a beaucoup de réflexions et de bonnes intentions
A
en ce
lot
sens
of reflections
dans certains pays,
are ongoing
de
in
la
some
région,
countries,
mais rien de réellement
but
concret
nothing
pour le
has
moment
actually been done yet.
dans le secteur qui nous concerne. Les pays arabes devraient peut-être s'inspirer
The Arab
de l'exemple
countries
iranien
should
dans ce
maybe
domaine.
look at the example of Iran in this
Outre qu'il
field.
conduit à une utilisation inefficace des ressources disponibles,
In addition
le régime
to
actuel de
having an
subvention constitue
impact on
également
the
une
actual
menace
use
pour le
of
développement
resources,
accéléré
it is
des
also
énergies
a
renouvelables.
threat for
Vu leur
a speedy
intermittence,
development of
le
renewable
solaire et
energies.
l'éolien ne sont pas
Because they are
compétitifs aujourd'hui
intermittent,
malgré les
solar
progrès
energy
importants
and wind
enregistrés à ce
energy
jour.
are not
Leur
competitive right
développement
now, despite the progress
nécessitera
they've already
une
made.
aide publique continue
Their
en
growth
termes
will
de soutien
require
financier.
public support, public financial
Le
support.
secteur privé local doit
The
être
local
sollicité en
private
parallèle.
sector should also be
Nous avons
called
vu
upon.
hier que l'entreprise
We
et le
saw
partenariat
yesterday
se préparent
that,
activement à apporter leur contribution.
entrepreneurs and
Mais leur mobilisation à
partners
grande échelle
are
dans ce
becoming
domaine, en nom
involved.
d'autres,
but their large-scale involvement
sans l'amélioration du
will
climat
not
des affaires,
happen without an improvement in the
l'adaptation
business
du cadre
environment,
institutionnel
the
et le
adaptation
renforcement
of the
des
institutional
capacités
framework and the
recherche-développement
strengthening
dans les
of the
filières
R&D
du renouvelable. Plusieurs pays
support
de la
in
région ont
renewable
bien
energies.
adopté des réformes plus
Several
ou moins
countries in the
adéquates
region
dans ce domaine,
have already set
notamment au
up
Maroc et en
appropriate
Jordanie,
reforms in this field, especially
mais
in
leur mise
Morocco
en
and
œuvre
Jordan,
est
but
souvent
their
retardée.
implementation is
Contrairement
often
donc
delayed.
à la conservation, qui peut avoir un effet immédiat
So,
ou à moyen
contrary
terme,
to conservation,
transition
which can
énergétique
have an
fondée sur le
impact in
renouvelable
the short to
nécessitera
mid-term,
un temps de
transition towards
maturation
renewable energies
et une courbe
will
d'apprentissage
require
d'au moins une dizaine d'années,
at
si ce n'est
least
plus,
10
même
years of
si le
maturing and
problème
learning,
d'acceptabilité est
even
relativement moindre dans la
if
région.
there isn't as much of an
De toute façon,
acceptance issue in the region.
La réforme des prix internes de l'énergie, outre qu'elle doit
Anyway, the
viser
reform
en dernier
of
ressort
energy
la
prices,
sécurité de l'approvisionnement national, mise à mal
if it has
dans certains
to
pays de la
focus
région
on
avec la baisse des réserves d'hydrocarbures et notamment
the
de gaz naturel,
securing of resources,
doit en même temps
especially
promouvoir
in the
la
region,
diversification
should
économique.
also promote economic
et créer des
diversification and create jobs.
À ce propos, il est indéniable que le
It is
développement des
indeed
énergies renouvelables
undeniable
offre,
that the
outre
growth of
ses
renewable
avantages
energies,
écologiques
apart
indiscutables,
from the
de meilleures
green
perspectives
impact that it has,
que les énergies
offer
fossiles
better
en termes
prospects than fossil
d'industrialisation,
fuels in
de
terms of
diversification
industrialization,
économique et
economic
donc de création
diversification, and hence job
On
creation.
estime que le nombre d'emplois
It is
créés dans l'industrie
estimated that the
mondiale
number of
des énergies
jobs
renouvelables
created
a
globally in
doublé
renewable
au cours des 10
energies
dernières
has
années,
increased
passant
twofold
de
in the
3
past 10
à
years,
6,5
going
millions
from 3
d'emplois.
to 6.5 million jobs created.
Il est clair qu'avec une intervention aussi courte sur un sujet aussi vaste,
It is
il y a
true that
toujours
talking
tendance
about
à
such a
généraliser.
subject in just 10 minutes, we
l'admets.
tend to generalize.
Il demeure qu'en dépit des disparités existantes
Nevertheless,
au niveau de leur
despite
patrimoine
existing
respectif en hydrocarbures fossiles,
differences
les pays de la région
in
ont en
the
commun
fossil
des
fuel heritage,
caractéristiques socio-économiques
the countries of the
comparables.
regions have similar
savoir
social and economic
Une
situations
population en forte augmentation,
with a strongly growing
une
population,
économie très peu diversifiée et une crise
not very
persistante
diversified
du
economy,
chômage,
and a
notamment au
strong
niveau de la
unemployment
jeune génération.
crisis, especially in young people.
Ce triste décor, comme vous le savez,
This
a été à
sad
l'origine des
settings
événements associés au printemps arabe.
triggered the events
Il n'a cependant pas
that came
connu
along with the Arab
d'amélioration
Spring.
notable.
There
Même dans les
hasn't
pays qui ont
been
depuis
much
connu
improvement
des changements
since,
politiques
even in the
dramatiques.
countries that underwent
À ce propos,
dramatic
il faut
political
souligner que les
events.
pays arabes
We have to
importateurs
underline
de
that
pétrole et de
Arab
gaz
countries that import natural gas
enregistrent de
and oil
meilleures performances en termes
have
d'efficacité
better
énergétique et
performance in
sont
terms
plus
of
actifs
energy
dans le
efficiency,
développement des renouvelables
and they are
que les
more
pays
active in the
traditionnellement
development of renewable
exportateurs
energies
d'hydrocarbures.
than the countries that
Faut-il
traditionally
attribuer
export
l'échec de ces
oil and
derniers
gas. Should we
au
say that
phénomène de
these
la
last ones have
malédiction du
failed
pétrole, comme certains le
because
font
of
volontiers,
the
ou à la
fate of
mauvaise
oil, or
gouvernance
is it because of
des
bad
dirigeants
governance
en
on the
place?
part of their
Cette question
governments?
soulève, bien entendu, un autre débat qui
This
sera sans doute
question
abordé
triggers another
dans la prochaine
debate
session.
that will probably be
Pour
talked about
conclure,
in the next session.
ma réponse à la question posée à
So
cette
by way of conclusion, my
session
answer
réflexion
to the
peut
question
se
that was
résumer comme
asked
suit.
can be summed up
Il est
this way.
difficile de prédire
It is
l'avenir
hard to tell the
tant
future
cette région est instable.
because this region
Le
is
développement
so
des énergies
unsteady.
renouvelables
The development
peut
of
effectivement
renewable
contribuer au
energies
renouveau du monde arabe,
can indeed
seulement si
contribute
la
to
transition
the
énergétique
renewal of the Arab world, but
à
only
laquelle
if energy
tous les pays de la
transition,
région aspirent
which
est
all
soutenue
countries in the region
par une
want,
véritable
is
transition
supported by
démocratique
genuine
qui tarde à se
democratic
concrétiser. Je
transition
vous remercie.
that is not yet happening. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Vous avez posé de manière magistrale
Thank you very
le
much.
problème et les enjeux du développement
I
des
believe
énergies renouvelables.
that you talked to us
On va laisser
about
la
the
parole
main
à
issues.
Monsieur Saïd Mouline,
And
qui
now
va
I'd like to
peut-être
give the floor
nous
to Saïd
présenter
Mouline, who will
le début de la solution.
maybe give us a first solution. Who knows?
Merci, Monsieur Lozano. Mesdames et Messieurs, c'est avec grand plaisir que j'interviens lors de cette rencontre sur le renouveau du monde arabe.
I'd like to talk about the renewal of the Arab world. And when I was listening to what my colleague just said, are renewables part of the future? Well, the answer is yes. Now, what exactly do we mean by future? 5, 10, 15 years? But I think that clearly some countries, and including mine, the Kingdom of Morocco, really do believe that there is a transition that has begun in 2009. And it actually began with a royal decree that stipulated that we needed to give priority to the renewable energies in our energy mix. So there is a real political will to change things. Then we needed to implement targeted objectives. We were asked to have concrete projects, and that is why we have a 2,000 megawatt solar megawatt program by 2020. So it means that in Morocco, in 2020, 42% of our energy mix will come from renewable energy. So, as I said, very precise targets. Now, for that, we also needed dedicated institutions. The ADERI, which I head, was a center that was created in the 1980s after the second oil shock. And let's, remember what Morocco was like. 95% of energy dependence, and we really needed to spend a lot of money for energy. And I think that that's why in 2009 really wanted to change things for economic reasons as well. So when I was saying that there was a political will, that's what I meant. There's also now a dedicated institution. We also have regulations. There is a law for this transition for renewable energies. And this law enabled us to open the market. Now, the Moroccan context is a bit different. I talked about the dependence, about the fact that there's a real growth in demand, but also at the same time, it is the private sector that invests, maybe for renewable energies, but also for fossil fuels. We also have coal-fired factories, and we're still going to invest in coal because this transition cannot happen overnight. So we can't, believe that we're going to go from one model to the next overnight. We need a steady progression, and we need a steady transition. So it is really in this spirit that this transition started. As I said, detailed targets, the institution, or the ADERI, but also the Mazen. We also have another institution which is going to look at all of our wind projects, and the private sector. We already have an economic model. We have private companies that are producing their own energy with renewable energies. We have wind farms, 400 megawatts, that are private, that is giving energy to different sectors. So we are really in a context where renewable energy is working, but there is a condition. We cannot have subsidies. So we are really in an economic model, because what we had beforehand was, electricity that was being subsidized, diesel that was being subsidized, fossil fuels were subsidized. So of course they were more competitive than renewables. When we did away with these subsidies, we were able to have an economic model. So we are able to have these wind farms. So just to show you that we are already in our own business economic model. Now, another part of what we did is, when you talk about, since we're talking about green energy, is that we were able to have green funding. Now, that is important. Everything that has to do with the solar plan, with the wind plan, was possible thanks to funding. The KfW, the German KfW, the European Bank for Investment, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, all participated to the funding of the Green Technology Fund in order to have loans in order to have affordable prices for all of these programs. So as you can see, all of these strategies, political will, regulations, etc., enables us to have this business model in order to go ahead with this transition. All of these projects are also developed in regions that need to be developed. The Ouarzazate plant, for example, but also all the wind farms in Tarfaya, in the south of the country, but also in Tangiers and elsewhere. So we really have now a business model where we want industrial integration, and at the same time, we want to develop the different regions of the country. This has an impact on the local population, of course, and there's also another impact, an industrial impact in all of these projects. In our strategy, we want to give visibility to the investors. This means that we have a very high industrial integration rate. So we already have a 30% industrial integration rate today. We have programs with companies from the north of the Mediterranean, but also from the south of the Mediterranean. We also have a solar cluster, which we operate with Mazer, and we have this will that you can see in all of our tender offers that needs to be taken into account. So with this approach, we really win on all boards. Why? Why do we want to have renewable energy in Morocco? Because it's more expensive than coal. We don't necessarily emit a lot of CO2. Moroccan releases 10 times less CO2 than a European citizen. So it just goes to show what I was saying. But we decided to go towards renewable energy because we have a strategy. We don't have a project, but we have a strategy. And if we integrate all of what I just described, we will actually be winners. We will be able to create jobs in the north and in the south of the Mediterranean with all of these different programs. There's also another important part of this, which is energy efficiency. You cannot have these huge renewable projects if you do not have a strategy for energy efficiency in lighting, in building, all of these sectors. We cannot afford to waste energy anymore. Energy is expensive, especially when it is not subsidized. We know the cost of renewables. And in this context, we are doing something that is very interesting. As you said, the energy intensity of countries is very high. So we want to work in order to do away with waste. So we need affordable pricing. In Morocco, we have we were able to have some subsidies, and we talked about, the very large renewable projects, and we're able to have small applications for renewables. A program was implemented, and if you pump water with solar energy, it is affordable, it is profitable, if the diesel is not subsidized anymore. So today we have opened a new market. We have a new part of this project, and who is funding all of this? When a project is profitable, the banks are behind us. And with the Econ from Morocco, we were able to get funding. So we have, 100 farmers with this pump, and that means 500 megawatts. So, you need to also think local. You need to think grassroots, not only big projects. There's also solar energy to heat individual houses, etc. So as you can see, you have big projects, small projects, and this energy efficiency policy with regulations, with trainings and awareness raising. And finally, I talked about, the fact that we were creating jobs, that there was a real potential for creating jobs. So yes, it's true that in the industry we can create jobs, and with energy efficiency, we will have a great impact. We had a big meeting on energy efficiency last year, and we were able to show that we can save 25% more energy between 2015 and 2030. That is a true energy transition. So when you take all of this, we will be able to have an impact on, creating jobs for young people. We have direct jobs, indirect jobs, and induced jobs, because the money that you're saving is then going to be injected in the economy, and so there will be a real impact in terms of job creation. So all of this to say that, yes, we need a strategy. Yes, we will be doing this in the future. It is true that, the Moroccan context is a bit different because of, energy dependency and the fact that, maybe oil-producing countries won't necessarily have the same strategy. But if you look at Norway, which is an oil-producing country, they are also changing. I mean, if you have right pricing, then you will have energy efficiency. You will have a boom of renewables. And as you know, fossil fuels, there are a finite resource. So I think that as of today, when we talk of the future, we need to really look toward what I just described. For me, renewables are the energy of peace. Why? Because we all know of projects in the world today that export, electricity over 2,000, 3,000 kilometers in China and Brazil and the US and Canada. And I think that, that is something that we'll be able to do in the future with other sources of renewable energy. Maybe, the South Mediterranean region could produce energy for Europe by 2030, 2050. Yes, I think that it is possible. Morocco is ready to for this challenge. We even have in our program, this export of green energy. So we are ready. Technically, we're ready legally. We are ready to do that. In the future, we will probably export green energy from the south of the Mediterranean region to the north of the Mediterranean region. Yesterday we talked about immigration, about what is happening in the Mediterranean region, unfortunately, and I think that what I just described is going to be a solution to all of that. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Molins. Vous avez dressé des perspectives passionnantes.
For this very interesting speech, we see that there is a real strategic vision in Morocco that we don't necessarily have here in France. Maybe Mr. Miscare will address this issue. But now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Dajani.
Des renouvelables comme opportunité.
She will be talking about the potential for the development of renewable energies in the Levant in a very complex situation politically. And what exactly is this situation today, Ms. Dajani?
Everybody. I would like to take this opportunity to express our deepest sorrow and solidarity with France for the tragic events of last week. I'm very honored to be invited by the Institut du Monde Arabe to participate in such an important forum among such distinguished speakers and audience. I cannot think of a better time and place for all of us together when the Arab and Muslim world is at a critical juncture. No one can predict the future, but this much is true. Energy requirements will play a vital role in determining it. The Arab world includes some of the richest and the poorest countries in terms of energy resources. If we compare many of our children in the region who have access to cheap electricity and water with a child from Gaza who is doing his homework by candlelight or under a street lamp, this disparity is evident even in countries that share borders. Jordan is among the highest countries in the world depending on foreign energy, with 96% of energy needs coming from imported oil and natural gas from neighboring Arab countries. This complete reliance on foreign oil imports consumes significant amount of our GDP, between 18 to 22% in the last years. In the context of rising energy demand, expected increase by 6% annually and 8% for electricity, Jordan implemented a national energy strategy for 2007-2020 to diversify its energy resources. The energy policy of Jordan operates on the basis of supply security, sustainability, affordability, and source diversity. Thanks to the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Law, Jordan implemented feed-in tariffs, net metering, competitive bidding, and to encourage the private sector to invest, as well as complete removal of income duties and energy conservation products. 700 megawatts are under construction now in 2015. The National Renewable Energy Fund was recently established to contribute to the finance of renewable energy projects. But I must not forget to mention the support of France in Jordan's development in the water and energy sectors through grants and soft loans totaling 540 million euro through the AFD, as well as providing expert assistance to help Jordan implement the national strategies towards a sustainable development. The share of the renewable energy in Jordan total energy mix is planned to be 10% by 2020 and 30% by 2030. The renewable energy can contribute a lot to our security and reduction of energy imports by capitalizing on our natural resources. We have the highest irradiation figures in the world at around 6.4 kilowatt per square meter per day in the south of Jordan, near a city called Man. One of the challenges we faced in Jordan, and it's over, was our reliance on natural gas imports from Egypt. It covered up to 80% of our electricity generation needs. But the continuous acts of sabotage on the Arab gas pipeline in the Sinai that's connecting Egypt to Jordan 27 times over the past 2 years has caused disruption, which forced Jordan to look at alternatives to stabilize supply streams and prices. The East Mediterranean gas and the Iraqi gas are options Jordan is considering. The case for renewable energy remains stronger in the MENA region than many other geographic areas. The MENA region should be the world leader in renewable energy because of its advantageous geography and climate. It also has the world's greatest potential for solar power generation, offering 45% of the world's total energy. Despite that, the Arab region's rich endowment, the energy today remains at, renewable energy remains at 6%. The market potential growth drivers and regulatory structure vary significantly by country. If the region develops renewable energy sector, oil and gas could be used to generate value as high-margin inputs into industries such as petrochemicals, offering a great value than it's currently utilized for power generation. The Arab government's political consensus aiming to increase renewable targets by 2030 to help meet rising electricity demand is an important milestone in the Arab world. It is estimated that the cost of the additional required infrastructure by 2020 in the Arab countries for electricity alone will cost $450 billion. Under the most optimistic forecasts for renewable, fossil fuel will remain the dominant source of energy in the foreseeable future. Cheaper oil has made renewable energy less cost-effective, although the cost of solar and wind continues to decrease. It is known that the energy picture in this region is changing fast. New resources, new players, the energy landscape is rapidly being transformed in the Eastern Mediterranean. We are presently witnessing the transformation of a poor region into a potential major producer and exporter of gas. The Syrian war, the evaporation of the border between Iraq and Syria, as the radical militants and the Islamic State capture wider territory, and their subsequent spread has devastating effects on Syria, Iraq, and Libya, changing the region in profound ways. There is a great potential to change the economic dynamics in the region. Through deeper economic integration, there is a good platform to build on. In my opinion, one of the most important Arab League initiatives is the study on the Pan-Arab Grid interconnection to investigate the best options for electricity and gas interconnections until 2030. The interconnecting of the GCC grid with the other grids, such as the existing 8-country grid, which is Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and Turkey, with the Maghreb Arab grid, will offer opportunity to export surplus power to Europe. The grid also would encourage energy interchange during seasonal diversity, with a peak demand during the hot summer seasons in the GCC region being supplied by regions where demand is low. Therefore, the development of a regional market through the GCC grid can provide alternative solutions to export power by energy wheeling as an alternative to exporting energy through gas and oil. The construction this year for the 500 kV high-voltage DC electricity interconnection project between Egypt and Saudi Arabia will be tendered out shortly. It will span 1,500 kilometers with an underwater cable running through the Gulf of Aqaba in Jordan. It will have a capacity to carry 3,000 megawatts of power. The estimated cost of the project is $1.5 billion and will achieve a return on investment of 13% for each country. The Saudi-Egyptian cooperation will solve one of the most critical energy challenges of our generation. The link will allow Egypt and Saudi Arabia to capitalize on the differences in their peak power, demand times, and it will facilitate trade and lead to cost saving of around $3.7 billion. The global business interests and the market demand will continue to influence the dynamics of the Middle East energy market. Public-private partnership must be fostered to unlock the investment potential in the MENA energy sector. The picture is bright. If regional electricity will not be dictated by politics, the region, which is maybe impossible, but I hope so, the region needs to improve its institutional frameworks, put an end to subsidies for conventional power, upgrade grid infrastructure, ensure the availability of finance for research and development in the sector, and the manufacturing of renewable energy components. Most importantly, we need to build the skills of our youth that is the largest in the world for a brighter future. Renewable energy requires upgrading of our existing infrastructure and habits, smart grids, smart meters, coupled with smart consumers who consume less, sell their extra energy for their efficient homes and offices to their utility. The technology is available. I hope we'll act on it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Merci. Merci beaucoup, Madame Dajani. Alors, on voit déjà, par les diagnostics établis par nos 3 premiers intervenants, qu'il y a de nombreuses convergences dans le diagnostic.
We see that the diagnosis,
en particulier dans le cas de la Jordanie, que même si les possibilités de transformation sont très importantes, tout reste largement à faire. Je vais maintenant donner la parole au docteur Salamé qui va justement parler un petit peu de l'éléphant au milieu du salon dont on n'a pas parlé jusqu'à présent. C'est le poids des hydrocarbures dans les économies, de nombreux pays arabes. Et pourquoi il y a aujourd'hui cette nécessité de diversifier, y compris pour les plus grands producteurs pétroliers.
for the wealthiest oil producers, and why the development of renewable energies and maybe for desalination and the production of drinking water is a strategic need. And there's also the issue mentioned by Mr. Haït-Hussein, which is the dramatic increase in production of electricity and electricity need. This is also something that pushes towards the growth of renewable energies.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This conference comes at a very crucial time for the global oil prices, with adverse impact on the global economy, the economies of the producers, and global investment. The topic I chose to speak upon is energy transition and diversification go hand in hand, and the case of the GCC countries. For those who are not aware of the GCC country or don't know what it stands for, it is an economic bloc made of 6 Gulf countries: Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, and Oman. Global transition is a arduous job, and it will take a long time to achieve. After all, it took more than 100 years for natural gas, since it is used as discovered for commercial use, to achieve 24% of the primary energy needs of the world. It took nuclear power 58 years to achieve a 4% of the primary energy, and it will take renewable energy between now and 2040 to raise its percentage from 2% to 10%. Now let's talk closer to home, the GCC countries. The GCC countries in the Gulf are a huge economic bloc. They own 645 billion barrels of proven reserves, accounting for 39% of the global total. They have a combined GDP of 1.9 trillion, so they are a formidable economic force. But their Achilles heel, or their weak point, is that they are so dependent on the oil price that they are always vulnerable to what happens with the oil price, especially when it declines, as is the case now. The GCC has not diversified its economies since the discovery of oil in the 30s. As it happens, they have been dependent on the oil revenue for 85% to 90%. And that's why their economies are being affected now, and they are encountering a deficit. The point I want to reach is that if the trends continue as they are with their indigenous consumption of oil, there will come a point by the year 2030 where they will be reduced to a small producer of oil. Actually, my projection is 1.4 million barrels a day. But by 2032, they will consume what they have been producing. The Gulf countries last year they produced around 19 million barrels. They have consumed 6 million of them, more than 30 to 32%. This means that, as I said, if they continue in that trend, they will become non-exporters, by 2032. Now, their consumption is composed of two things. They use using a lot of oil for water desalination plants. And also they use for electricity generation. Let me show you, if I can. They already have 199 desalination plants of different sizes. In the case of Saudi Arabia alone, it uses 1.2 million barrels a day of its production to fuel 27 desalination plants. Then there is electricity generation. I know they cannot do anything about the weather. They need air conditioning, but they could also shift from oil and gas to something else. Now, they are trying to enhance the use of solar power as well as nuclear power, and I think they have signed some contracts to that effect. Solar power could power all the desalination plants in the Arab Gulf, which means if they can do that, they save a lot of oil for exports and they will earn more money. They enhance the longevity of their oil reserves, and at the same time, they will have a very good impact on the environment. But above all, they will be able to build so many desalination plants along in the Gulf area, on the Arabian Sea, and on the Red Sea, particularly for Saudi Arabia. In the case of nuclear power and solar power, it can provide them with all the electricity they need, and solar power could provide them with a good export of electricity to Europe in coming years. But there is also a downside to it, which is subsidies. In 2012, the global subsidies amounted to around $500 billion. The bulk of that, or a large percentage of that, were in the Gulf. It is not acceptable that in a country like Saudi Arabia, a liter of oil is sold for 11 cents. 1 hour electricity is 3 cents. They subsidize water, they subsidize food, they subsidize oil, they subsidize everything. And when you are dependent on the oil revenue, there is not much left. So for that reason, I think the subsidy has to be removed. But they cannot remove it immediately because they will have a rebellion on their hands. What they can do, they can increase the prices of these subsidized materials. So over a period of 5 to 6 years, they can eliminate subsidies, but using what they have saved for the benefit of the majority of the people. Now, these things can be done. What about diversification? We noticed that in the case of diversification, they haven't. So the diversification I am urging them to do is not to invest in real estate or casinos or buildings. I am asking them to invest, nor am I asking them to invest in industrialization, because they cannot compete with old hands like Europe, like the United States, Japan, South Korea, and China. What I am asking them to do is invest in food production. We have Sudan, which has the 3rd biggest arable land in the world, and they have a huge amount of water, which is the Blue and White Nile. So GCC as a whole, as one unit, should invest in water and food revolution in Sudan. That will enable it to become the breadbasket for the Gulf, saving them billions of dollars of imports of food from the United States and giving them food security. What is in excess of their needs can be exported at high prices, because I believe within the 20 to 30 next years, the food prices could even exceed that of oil. It will be a good source of income for them. So, for that reason, I am saying that they should also invest in the most up-to-date technology in water desalination, in renewable energy such as solar energy and nuclear energy. Failing to do that will reduce them to non-exporters by the 2030. So I will end my presentation by saying, for the Gulf region countries, energy transition goes hand in hand with diversification. Without diversification, they cannot do the transition, and that's how I will end my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Je passe maintenant la parole à Gérard Mesralé, qui PDG de GDF Suez, dont l'activité est exactement à la frontière entre les énergies fossiles et le développement
his business is really at a crossroads between on energies. But I think you first want to show us a small video which you will comment on.
Maroc, près de la ville de Tarfaya, se construit un champ de 131 éoliennes de 2,3 MW chacune, réparties sur plus de 10 000 hectares de désert. Un projet unique pour GDF Suez qui est en charge de la construction et de l'exploitation du parc.
C'est le plus important parc éolien d'Afrique. C'est le plus important parc jamais construit par le groupe GDF Suez. Ça représente plus d'1,2 milliard de kilowattheures de production par an. C'est l'équivalent de la consommation d'1,5 million d'habitants. C'est une ville comme Marrakech. Donc ça va éviter l'émission de plus de 900 000 tonnes de CO2. C'est l'équivalent de l'absorption de plus de 150 millions d'arbres par an.
En fournissant 6% de la production d'électricité totale du pays en 2015, le parc éolien de Tarfaya s'inscrit dans la politique énergétique du Maroc qui mise fortement sur les énergies renouvelables. La société Tarek, détenue à 50% par GDF Suez, est en charge du projet. Malgré des conditions difficiles, près de la moitié des éoliennes sont déjà posées.
The big challenge is to work in a place without the same condition that we are used to have. So this is everything here is very hard. All this wind, the dust in the air. We have already around 61 wind turbines erected. So and the other ones, as you can see, we are in this process of construction.
Pour relever le défi, GDF Suez a choisi des équipements adaptés au désert. Le but, obtenir un taux d'utilisation très élevé de 45% pour une capacité de 300 MW. C'est Siemens Wind Power qui a été choisi pour fournir, installer et mettre en service les éoliennes.
Les éoliennes que nous installons ici à Tarfaya, elles ont un design spécifique pour évacuer la chaleur à l'intérieur des éoliennes. L'ensemble de la ferme éolienne est également équipé de détecteurs de vent de sable.
À la fin de l'année, la totalité des éoliennes seront mises en service et alimenteront le réseau national marocain. GDF Suez assurera l'exploitation du site pour une durée de 20 ans.
This is the first wind farm that GDF Samea is building. So this is very important for GDF Suez, of course, because it's one of the projects that allows the GDF to start the business in Africa.
Voilà, donc peut-être avant de commenter un peu ce film,
Before I
ce
comment
projet,
this video, this project, first of all, a few words on GDF Suez.
Présent dans 70 pays.
Our company is in 70 countries.
Partiellement sur les rives du Nil,
this group was partly born on the Nile because Suez operated the Suez Canal for many years, and Suez merged with Gaz de France a few years ago. And Gaz de France built a partnership with Algeria. It's been going on for 35 years, and we're also partners of Egypt for natural gas. GDF Suez is the first private producer of electricity in the world, and we're also number one in the Arab world. This Tarfaya site is the largest wind farm of Africa. 300 megawatts, but it's only 1% of the electricity we produce in the Arab world. Because we now have more than 30 gigawatts. So that's the equivalent of 30 nuclear plants. And they are mostly in the Gulf countries, in the GCC, so around the Gulf, and they are all natural gas plants that were built in partnership with local partners. We're also present in Morocco, not only in wind energy, but we're also building a very big coal plant in Safi. GDF Suez's strategy, which was very clearly redefined last year, is dual. We want to be the energy, the reference energy company in the emerging world, and we also want to be the leader of energy transition in Europe. And I will come back to energy transition later on.
Notre philosophie, c'est le partenariat.
Our approach is a partnership approach in all the countries we're in, and especially with the countries on the other side of the Mediterranean. We have developed this concept of a direct partnership with the companies from the north and the south of the Mediterranean. The Union for the Mediterranean is a great organization, but it's not moving forward fast enough politically. But we are trying to make it move forward more quickly at company level. So we want to have cooperation and co-production, and this is what we are implementing here.
Ce parc de Tarfaya, quelques mots.
So this Tarfaya wind farm,
il a marché, il marche.
So why is it working? First of all, it has received very strong support from Moroccan authorities, which is an essential element. As I said, you need to have visibility and clear rules for private investors to actually invest.
Deuxièmement, le projet doit être structuré de manière extrêmement
the structure of the project has to be very efficient legally and financially speaking. It is indeed the case for this project, and it's also the case for all electricity production projects that are paired with the desalination plants in the Gulf countries. There's a very clear legal structure and financial structure. The public local partners own 60% of the project, while the private investors own 40%, and there's a private purchase agreement that is usually a long-term contract of around 25 years that secure the future cash flows and that can provide proper project finance. So when the legal framework is clear, project finance is possible. We always find financing. In the case of Morocco, we have a major counterpart in the National Office of Water and Electricity, and we knew them very well because we knew them in Casablanca. So the National Office of Electricity buys all the Tarfaya electricity and then is in charge of distribution. So having a counterpart that guarantees the stability and security of the operation is also a very important factor. Thirdly, energy transition. This is a concept that everyone sees as wants to see it. So I'll tell you what it means to us. We want to be leaders in energy transition for Europe. Energy transition doesn't just come from political will, but comes from technological changes that are major changes. The world of energy is a world in which during 50 years there has been little technological progress. And very suddenly we are seeing revolutions happen. We have a technological and energetic revolution. It's solar energy, wind energy. And in addition to this, we have the digital revolution. And the combination of the two creates a major transformation. In addition, we see a major shift in people's approach, consumers' approach to energy. Consumers want to know if the energy comes from nuclear production or wind production or so on. And there's also the emergence of solar energy and wind energy that are renewable energies that produce zero carbon emissions. And there's also a possibility of miniaturization. So the size of the equipment has been divided by two. Thermal plants with in gigawatts, wind plants are megawatts, whereas solar plants are kilowatts, and this allows decentralization. For countries in the Arab world, it's going to be an interesting challenge because having both the increase in demand and needs and these new technologies allow some change. Of course, we will still need to have the big plants, the big gas, coal, and nuclear plants for the countries that chose nuclear plants, such as Saudi Arabia or Abu Dhabi. So the major, we'll also have the major renewable energy plants with the big dams, for instance, but also these small renewable energy production facilities accessible to all consumers. It's possible not to cover the whole territory, but it can give access to these energies to everyone. We are currently developing a system of small facilities, for instance, a solar panel with just a plug, a socket, a plug, and you can charge your cell phone, and this is just for $30. So you can bring electricity to people who do not have it. Countries in North Africa and in the Middle East will have to make several choices. They will have to decide which share they want to allocate to renewable energies, and they will also have to decide what kind of role they want this highly decentralized energy to have. I'm not here to give any advice, but we have experience in many countries, and we've seen some countries making serious mistakes, especially in Europe. So maybe a piece of advice would be not to make the same mistakes that were made by some countries, and not to go too quickly. This energy transition is underway. Nothing will ever stop it. But countries can adapt the pace so that it can be reasonable. And this was not always the case. And
seeing
that the development of solar energy in Italy happened too quickly. The development of wind energy in Spain happened too quickly. And in Germany, the development of both was too quick. So these countries now have to stop significantly right now. We should not forget that these energies are non-renewable. Let's not forget that at night the sun is not here in plants. Electricity is needed 24 hours a day. So we'll have this issue of energy storage. We have not solved this issue yet. So we have to have a proper breakdown of energy mix. With still fossil fuels for several years, and especially gas. Gas plants, fueled plants can be turned on or off very easily. And because of the solar energy and the wind energy being intermittent, we have to be able to have a backup system. So what we usually say is that you really have to assess this energy mix and include more and more renewable energies, but not going too quickly. So this has to be done progressively. One last thing I wanted to mention is CO2 and the price of carbon. I think this is a reflection that should be looked at by Arab states. I think that we will have a very direct question, and we'll talk about carbon pricing a lot soon. Thank you.
Et merci pour cette ouverture sur les enjeux climatiques, le prix du carbone,
thank you
les émissions de CO2.
For this opening you are giving us on CO2 and carbon pricing.
Tout à l'heure très rapidement, c'est un point clé dans le développement du modèle économique des énergies
in the economic development of renewable energies, the management of the intermittent aspect of these energies, its cost and its impact. That's something I would like to come back to. Mr. Moulin, is it possible to handle this aspect without necessarily using natural gas, or is it do we need gas and hence CO2 emissions to handle the intermittent aspect of renewable energies?
Quand le gaz est là, bien sûr, on en profite.
Well, when there is natural gas, well, we use it because it's very flexible, it's very easy to use, and it goes really hand in hand with renewables. But I think that we can use other ways for this intermittence. In Morocco, what we do is we have dams. We have these pumping stations, that's what we have in Europe, in Switzerland, for example. And we can explain what that is, where you have two dams, one above the other. And so basically, we pump the water from the dam that is beneath towards the one that is overhead. And then when we need energy, we just basically make the water drop. But between peak hour and non-peak hour, there's a difference in the price. And so this is something that you need to assess and do with. So basically, we use the dam as a battery. So we pump water and then we let it flow. So we take off energy and then we create energy by dumping the water. So this is a way to solve the problem, but you need a site. So we have such a site in Morocco that is actually in effect, and we are preparing another one with a capacity of 400 megawatts. So it is really capacity, a storage capacity of 400 megawatts. Now another solution, and I think that this was an innovation in Ouarzazate, is that the plant it does that. When after the sunset, when there is a peak hour, we can actually make the plant work for 3 additional hours. That is not possible with photovoltaic, but with thermal solar power. So basically, we regenerate this power, and so we have a first slot for 3 hours, and then for the second slots, so further during the night, we're going to do that. We're going to be able to do that. So these are not batteries? No. You can store thermal energy in different ways. So we have different technologies. We can basically capture the heat during the day when there's a lot of heat, and then we're going to use this heat in order to make the plant function. And then the other part of the heat goes in a sort of bunker where there is salt, and salt is actually melted with this heat, and then it regenerates heat after sunset. So basically, after the sunset, we can generate power. We can even have a 24-hour solar plant site, and oftentimes, that is very expensive, and also during the night you don't need a lot of energy. You need energy during peak hours. So that's why, when we talk about this transition is going to take place over time. We are going to keep, using gas and fossil fuels in the 10-15 years to come, but we are in a system where, there is a lot of technological change and progress, especially since these past 10-15 years. And the approach that we had really to work with renewables is what enabled all of these different changes and innovations. Today, in certain cases, renewables are competitive, so this is possible. Also, just to go back on this intermittence, I'd like to say first about grid management. This has changed also. Why? Well, because the electricity companies now know how to manage this intermittence. We know how to predict the capacity of a wind farm 95% of the time. So we know exactly when to use the energy. When you have interconnected grids between countries, for example, Morocco is connected to Algeria, to Spain, in the future to Mauritania. So when the grid is interconnected, it's easier to manage this intermittence. So this is something they need to keep in mind. And I'm saying this because, we've always had a very good flow between us, no pun intended. But I think that, you can find a balance, especially amongst electricity companies. So you can really strike a balance. You can use dams, natural gas, these new technologies for storage that I just described. So thanks to all of this, intermittence is something that can be managed.
Monsieur Mestrallet ou Monsieur Salamé sur cette
Mr. Mestrallet or Mr. Salami, there are other questions for you. For example, do you think that the drop in barrel prices is going to, offset the innovations in renewables? Do you think that, this is something that's going to hinder innovation in renewables? Or do you think that that is really bad news for transition? Mr. Mistral, and then maybe Mr. Salame. No, I don't think so. I don't think that the energy transition is something that is completely structural. It is ballistic, I guess, yes. And I think that, this is something that's going to happen over the 30, 40, 50 coming years. The price of oil has dropped. Yes, that is true. It has plummeted. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. But I heard a lot of experts. I'm sure that Dr. Salame will say much more on this than I can. But I think that the technological advances that have operated recently, the fact that there's a real, collective and individual will to go towards a zero-carbon economy, to really fight against climate change, which is something that is going on a world level. The fact that you have a lot of individuals, a lot of people who want to change their way of using energy and who want to produce their own energy, to manage their energy. I think that all of this is good for energy transition and will actually accelerate it. Now, of course, the price of fossil fuels might, slow the pace of transition. But I think the transition is headed and is underway. Mr. Salame, you are very good connoisseur of the Persian Gulf. What do you think that this plummeting in oil prices, what do you think that the consequences will be in terms of energy transition and in terms of the capacity to fund the energy transition?
Energy transition is a long-term objective. So whether the prices go down or up, it is a necessity and not a luxury. So putting this aside, the declining oil prices or the steeply declining oil prices have very adverse impact on the global economy as well as on the economies of the producers. The common wisdom says that when the oil price declines like that, it is beneficial to the economy. I modestly disagree with that. Why? Because the global economy is made of many big chunks of economic units, one of which is international investment. When the price goes down like that, global investments in all aspects of the economy decline, particularly in oil and gas and energy. Second thing, the biggest chunk of the global economy is the oil industry. The 7 major oil companies have already started limiting and reducing their investments and at the same time selling some of their production units, which means in 2 years' time, their share in the global oil production will be less, and that will put a huge floor under the oil price and will put a big pressure to push it up. Then you have the economies of the producing countries, talking from the Gulf economies to Russia, to Iran, to Canada, to all these to all these producers. The global economy, in summary, cannot live with a price even at $40 or $50. That's why I am projecting now that the oil price will recoup most of its losses and its trend is upward. And OPEC made a wrong decision, very wrong decision, by not cutting their production by 2 million barrels to absorb the glut. I think they will be forced soon to reverse their decision and to call an urgent meeting of OPEC to cut their production. Otherwise, everybody is a loser.
C'était la projection, c'était le pronostic de Monsieur.
So that is your prediction, Dr. Salame. Thank you. We still have about 10 minutes. I would like to give the floor to Ms. Dajani on
des énergies renouvelables comme facteur de paix.
The fact that renewables are a factor of peace. You are players of the Arab world, in the Arab world, and so you know.
De votre point de vue, est-ce que les
I mean, rather, in your opinion, do you think that the political leaders that you know and that you meet frequently are serious when they talk about the energy transition? And also, do you believe that this is a true necessity? Do you think that it is seen as a necessity for the stability and the peace in the region? So, Ms. Dajani, if you could maybe answer this question, what do you feel?
Absolutely. I think all the Arab governments, all the Arab leaders are very committed to diversifying their energy basket, to renewable energy, to clean energy, to green economies. I think trading of energy is very important amongst us. I think everybody is keen to upgrade their grids because the future, the current grids cannot take the green infrastructure that we are building. Future grids have communication in them, which makes them more efficient. We will have less losses. I think some countries in the Levant, let's say, are not capable yet to either trade or to implement renewable energy, although they would like to. For example, Syria, they have a complete destroyed infrastructure from their gas or electricity. Lebanon has very limited renewable energy. Because they don't have the space for solar farms. However, there will be a growth in rooftops, as we would see in the near future. I think 90% of their energy is based on oil. I think, yes, absolutely. And I would like to add that I don't think the price of oil will affect renewable energy because there is a commitment to increase the renewable energy in the MENA region. And it depends upon governments and the government's support and will. Oil prices don't bother us whatsoever. And if we see the price that Aqua has bid for in Dubai, it was 5.4 per kilowatt hour. So it's a very, very, very competitive price to oil and gas and everything else. So yes, solar and wind and renewable energy can compete if the other energies are not subsidized. And even if they are subsidized, the prices continue to be lowered.
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur Aït-Laoussine, le développement des énergies renouvelables comme facteur de paix,
the fact that renewable energies are a factor of peace, what does that mean for you? We know that in Algeria, hydrocarbon resources are really at the heart of your government, of your state. And so thanks to oil, the government has been able to buy social peace. I would go so far as to say. But also there's another aspect. You talked about the fact that we are really pushing oil producers to look into renewable energies. We see that in Algeria there are difficulties to really keep up the production of oil and gas. So do you believe that the development of renewable energies will actually maybe be also a factor of social peace in the future? And also the fact that these resources are finite, which is not something that we are really talking about recently, but do you think that can have an impact also? Well, first of all, I would like to come back on this issue of intermittence and the fact that we need to be careful in the Arab world, especially compared to Europe. Given that solar power is very intermittent as well as wind power, it is very important to have a sort of a backup fuel. As you know, the ideal backup fuel is hydraulic power. Why? Well, because it is the least expensive source of energy, but also it is by definition a non-polluting source, a real green source of energy. Unfortunately, it is not present everywhere, namely in the Arab region. Now, this being said, it is obvious that this issue of intermittence means that we absolutely have to maintain this effort of using renewables. It is very important that this backup fuel be used. That the backup fuel that is going to be used is natural gas. In Europe, if you look at the big utilities, the big utility companies, and I'm sure that Mr. Mistral knows this, there is a capacity of 50 gigawatts for Europe, there has been a real drop in the consumption of gas. So, in Europe, we increasingly use coal. And we need to make sure that the price of carbon doesn't plummet. Also, I would like to come back on
l'effet, il faut vraiment le mettre dans la bouche là.
I really need to hold this microphone very close to my mouth. I almost need to eat it. Okay, so the effect of the drop in oil prices. I think that, as I tried to show you earlier, I think there is in the Arab world the importing countries that are making a lot of progress in renewables. And then you have the rest of the Arab world that export energy, and they're not making a lot of headway. And I think that, with these plummeting oil prices, countries like Tunisia and Morocco that import energy will have less expenses in terms of, their imports, which will, really induce them to spend more in innovations, for example. So are you saying that the exporting countries are a bit blocked, or rather that the... well, I think that for some time, as the Professor Mamdouh said, the energy transition is a very long-term goal. In the case of Algeria, we see a real demand, a real hike in the demand, not only a real hike in electricity, but also for natural gas. We see an increase of 10% per year. For desalination, petrochemicals, etc. There is a real problem in Algeria. Why? Because we always thought that we had enough natural gas in order to cover the demands of several generations, but it is not the case anymore. Of course, those in the government will never admit that this is the case. I think that, maybe not tomorrow, but in a pretty near future, we will need to import our gas. But this will, of course, depend on the strategy of Algeria. We know that this day will come, so don't you think that as of now, we need to put aside part of our natural gas for the future generations? Do we need to, as of now, reduce the import of natural gas? I do not think that Algeria will be able to continue exporting natural gas as we do today. Let us not forget that we export 80 billion cubic meters of natural gas. Today, only 45 billion. But I think that, all of these elements are interconnected. We need to really put a lot of thought in, first of all, reducing our exports in Algeria, and then trying to find the way to reduce our consumption of natural gas. And finally, Algerians today are demonstrating against shale gas. You've probably seen that these past 2 weeks there have been a lot of demonstrations in Algeria, in Sahara, and basically now this issue has just been reduced to shale gas, and we don't even take into account all the other elements of this debate, as if our strategy only had to do with shale gas, which is not the case. Well, thank you very much. We are going to have to conclude on this round table. We've heard a message of hope, but also we have heard of the challenges, of the hindrances for this transition. Well, first of all, I would like to thank all of you for coming here today and speaking at this roundtable. Thank you very much.